All right, so I have Beniel here, and this is probably the first time we've ever talked. Um,
That's
uh,
right. I
yeah,
don't had a conversation. I think I just like we fought. I said, hey, like it was like a good job, okay, and then we just went our ways. It was my first fight in the UFC, and I was so happy. And the thing was so quick. I was just, I don't think we got a chance to talk. I was just on cloud nine at the time.
yeah, I can imagine. And so, since that kind of why I want to talk to you, and it's weird, I'll explain it now, maybe a little bit on the intro, but so I had sent you a message, and it was probably over a year ago. I forget. Do you remember? I don't remember who you had just fought. Um,
Probably Tony, if it was a year ago.
okay, that
Either
would make
Tony
sense.
or I mean, I fought Gamrot and Tony. It's been I haven't been able to fight as much. The thing that sucks about the top 15 is or top 10 is like it's a lot harder to get fights now because you can't as you fight behind you. Like you, my management and my team gets pissed at me if I wait for another fight. It takes who knows how long, and so it's really hard to find fights when you're in the top 10 unless you're somebody like Dustin Poirier or Connor. Hey boys, close that door. It's loud. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries at all. And so I had seen you fight, and I sent you a message, and it got buried somewhere in your Instagram. And then,
Yeah, sorry. Just let me explain that. I don't understand how Instagram works because it had filtered you out, and I'm not sure why. So I'm not so technology friendly. So I'm like going through my messages, and my wife always tells me, "Hey, you have messages. You have to look through them." And I'll look through like a few, but then there's so many, you get overwhelmed, right? So what I started doing to not just get anxious about it, I started deleting them. Once I started deleting them, then I finally saw your message, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't answer this." I felt awful, so I messaged you right away, and then I continued on deleting all the messages because it was making me anxious knowing so many people messaged me and I haven't responded, and I didn't want to think about it anymore, so I just deleted them.
yeah, I appreciate you getting back to me, but I feel the same sentiment sometimes on Instagram or Facebook. I go through the spam, and then you see a real mess, and you're like, oh man, crap. Because the last thing I want is for someone to think I'm an a-hole that just chose not to respond.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. I don't understand why you would be in the spam. You're verified, and I know it's a lot harder to be verified on Instagram, and also like we have mutual
Yeah.
following, or like the whole thing didn't make sense. I was just whatever. I'm over it.
Well, I appreciate being here. And I was just talking to I think my wife the other day. Every once in a while I'll watch fights or whatever, and you'll come up and she say, oh, he's still fighting. I don't know other guys that I fought in the UFC who are still fighting. It's in the UFC. It's possible there are, but you might be the last one. Um,
Yeah, I didn't think about it like that. Yeah, I've been in the UFC now for almost 10 years. I think I'm over 9 years now. Sheesh.
it's crazy. And it's like, so I was your first fight, and then I had two more after you, but it was that same year. So when you started, I finished. And when I
Yeah.
talk to people about the UFC, it's in my life, it's like a different life. Who I am today, what I do now versus what I did then. It's a completely different life. But then also how much the UFC has changed since then till now. And so like
Yeah.
you're living that.
So the changes have been interesting because, like, right after, I don't know if you went through the Reebok deal. So
No, no.
exactly, I had random stuff on my shorts. I had things I've never heard of with clouds and like Alienware like something with green. I don't remember the names of all of them, or and then they tell me my management will be like, listen, if you want more sponsors, you have to wear these longer shorts. I was like, I guess fine, it's not a big deal. So I get longer shorts, and then you would have weird ones, and then you would have people who message you who want to be sponsored, but then the UFC would be like, nah, that doesn't work like that. You have to work through the UFC. So I'm like, I don't miss the process of it, but I do miss that the pay. It was better pay back then, with the sponsorship. So that is something I will say. The hassle was it was a hassle. It was exactly what it was, but the pay was better. Then Reebok came, and now we're working with Venom and Reebok, I believe, because for our shoes are still Reebok.
Yeah. And what about, so people ask me about,
Maybe not. Actually, the shoes I think
it's
are
The
Dwayne
Rock,
Johnson.
isn't it? Yeah, The
My
Rock.
bad. My bad.
Yeah, that's all right. People ask me about, hey, what's it like? And I'll tell them it was like this, but I have no idea what it's like now. And just the little stuff. So maybe you could inform me, but also people who are listening. What about when you arrived at the airport? Like it used to be like I was buddies with the guys who worked for the UFC and we'd all get in a van and go to the hotel. What is that process like now?
Well, that process is sometimes similar, but remember, COVID happened. So when COVID happened, everything was personalized. Like you don't get to ride with other people. My first fight with you, I got in the car. It was Luke Rockhold and his coach, Javier Mendez, were in the car. He was talking with my coach, and it was all good, whatever. And then we got there, and we did our thing. And then once COVID hit, things changed. COVID hit, it got weird, bro. Like you'd have to ride by yourself or with your team. They'd lock you into your hotel basically. You want food, call like Uber for your teammates. The UFC will make your food, which is really nice. That's one thing I will say that's really nice right now. Nutrition, the week of the fight, you don't need to do anything. The UFC will make exactly what you want, and like whatever way you want it. So it's
And
it's
that,
it's really nice. I will say the UFC has become a lot more professional in a lot of ways. There's no doubt about it. As far as your nutrition goes, if you need help with your strength and conditioning, they'll give you programs. They'll do VO2 maxes to see where you stand and where you're weak. And if you take advantage of all these things, it's an easy way to become a high level athlete. And doing less work sometimes. It turned out like the few times I visited the PI, they basically told me I overwork, and like I'm not gonna take that advice and be like, oh
yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. I'll do less, but they kind of had to show me from all the injuries I was getting, and so from all the overwork, and they had to teach me that way, and little by little I figured it out. I will say I can't think of everything, but the UFC has made a lot of improvements.
And that stuff you're talking about, the food during fight week. I do want to talk about the PI separately, but all that's included in what you're doing. You guys don't have to pay for that extra stuff.
Yes. Yeah, everything's included. The things that haven't changed are like, I think you get your ticket and your one corner.
Yeah.
Which I think is a little strange, like you guys are a $21 billion company, I guess now, since they bought the WWE. You guys, and it's not like it's just a write-off for you. I don't understand why you wouldn't include that in. There's little things that they like nickel and dime you on that I'm like so shocked because they're such a big company. And then there's things they do that you're like, oh my gosh, they're really going out of their way, and this is amazing. So I just don't get like what the mindset is sometimes. I would love to kind of pick their brain, but I know they're probably thinking like, get this guy out of here. We don't want to talk to him. We know what we're doing, kind of deal. So I don't really follow up too much on it.
And what about the Performance Institute in Vegas? Do you go there? Can you go there whenever you want? How does that whole process work?
You can go there whenever you want. They'll give you, I believe, 2 free meals plus supplements plus shit. Like you want a shake, they'll make it for you. It's like they have like a bar for whatever. They have conditioning coaches there. They have physical therapy there. They do all your programs as far as to see where you're at, your level, like let's say VO2 max, your strength, your speed, where you're weak in terms of physically. So there's a lot there, and then you can train there too. It's just there's no there's no training by the UFC. It's all organized by teams, which is
And
probably for the best, because if the UFC is training you,
yeah,
guys will be like, what the heck? Why are they favoring this person?
yeah, and all that stuff's included too. Your trip, all
Yeah.
that at the PI. Wow, that's awesome. And
See what I mean? Like they put so
yeah,
much money into that, but then like, okay, it's a $200 flight, but
you got to
only
pay
one.
for it.
They only give, what? It's weird. So it is what it is.
Um, and lodging at the PI. Is there lodging on site, or you get a hotel?
No, you have to get your own hotel. That's the one thing, you have to get your own hotel. But a lot of guys live in Vegas now. The PI is so beneficial, and there's so many camps there, so many guys you can train with. I've gone and trained there a few places. I believe I've trained at Extreme Couture is usually the place I go, but I've heard great things about Syndicate and other places. Like there is there is a ton of good guys there. My issue would be with Vegas is, obviously it's right by the strip, so it could be a distraction. That's one issue I have. The other issue I have is comfort. I I find comfort to be the greatest enemy of progress. So to be near the PI where like your food's taken care of, like they'll massage you and do PT on you and this and that, I find it to be a threat to me. That's one of the reasons why I don't go there as often as I should. Just because I go there and I get so comfortable, in the back of my head is like maybe I should be here more often, and so that's the insecure part of me. That's one of the reasons why I don't go there as much as I should.
Yeah. So let's kind of backtrack and then we'll come up to your training right now. You've always seemed like a very nice person. So any like,
Okay.
I just see you, I'm fighting this guy. I remember watching your videos. I was standing in my kitchen, like Googling you for the first time, watching jujitsu. Respectful, similar my approach to fighting in life. I feel like we're pretty similar in that regard. So I'm personally curious. I don't know how much you talk about it elsewhere, but just your upbringing, your athletics prior to jujitsu, how you got into jujitsu, and then ultimately we'll talk about the fighting.
So I was born in Iran. I didn't do any sports except play like soccer or like just play with my friends climbing trees until I was 9 years old, and then I came to America. In America, it was a culture shock. I spent more time playing video games than anything else. When I turned 14 or 15, I played soccer in high school, and then at 18, I decided to do jujitsu. Actually, prior to that, I got kicked out of the soccer team my senior year. The coach wanted to bring in new guys, like a new team. He didn't like the older guys that we were kind of troublemakers. So he brought in the new team, kicked me out, and one of my buddies was like, "Bro, just come wrestle." I was like, "Bro, I'm gonna be 18 in a month and a half. Why am I gonna come wrestle?" But I went in, I wrestled, and I loved it. It was really fun. Like it was one of the best experiences I've had in terms of sports in high school. And I finished high school, or I was about to finish. I don't remember exactly, but uh, people were trying to scare me. Basically, they're like, "Hey, you go to college. It's called the freshman 15 or something. You get fat, you get out of shape, and all you do is study." And they're scaring the crap out of me. And at that time, I worked at Baskin Robbins, so like I eat ice cream all day, and so it genuinely kind of worried me. The other problem with me is like I do not enjoy working out, like lifting weights, running. All these things are they're awful. I don't know how else to put it. I genuinely consider them awful. So I just was like, what the heck am I gonna do? And I watched MMA a little bit, right? I used to watch like the UFC Unleashed, and I watched that, and I thought of, well, I'll just do jujitsu. I had enough understanding that jujitsu didn't have punching in it. I said I'll do that. So I jumped into jujitsu, and I loved it. It was like, okay, I'm gonna train. Let's say I'll try like train once a day, almost every day. I started like that. Within a month, I was training every day. I had ended up scheduling my college classes around jujitsu. I scheduled my work around jujitsu, and I went from training once a day to competing. And then once I competed, bro, it was like I can't explain it. I had competed in other sports like soccer. I never really got a rush from it. I competed in wrestling. I had a bit of a rush, but then when I competed in jujitsu and just like the rush of it, just I don't know what it was, but like winning at that time was such an idol for me. So I ended up focusing on just jujitsu and just competing in jujitsu for a long
And
time.
were you in California at this time?
Yeah, we're in California. I moved to Orange County, and I've been in Orange County my whole life.
And then where were you training jujitsu? Like with whom were
Yeah,
you
at
training?
that time, it was called Half Gracie. My coach was Bruno Paulista. His nickname was Mamouche. Really big guy, and he was very good jiu-jitsu. One of the most talented guys at the time. Unfortunately, he had a car accident in Brazil a couple of years in. But fortunately, he made it back to the States, and obviously he can't compete and do what he used to do, but he has a gym still, and he has a family, and it's a beautiful story, man. His story is really cool.
And did you lean toward gi or no gi?
Oh, I was gi guy. I was competing gi. I was a it was like this. I competed in the gi, but I loved. I mean, I competed no gi too because there was like seasons at the time. You go through the gi and then you got to do no gi because there's no other competition. So I was a world champion. I don't even know if you can call it a world champion, but white belt. I was a world champion, and then blue belt, purple belt, and brown belt. I never competed as a black belt, so I was able to win a
Wow.
big tournament at all the belts. And then as far as competing goes, man, I'm telling you, I love jujitsu. It was weird because I had never loved any other sport like that. I placed first, second, or third in pretty much all the tournaments I did. But the weird thing was, if I got second or third, I would literally throw my medals in the trash, or I would break the stupid plaques they gave me. I was young, obviously, and immature, but there was definitely like a little crazy brokenness in me. There was definitely something not right in the head.
Yeah. And so you were like 19-ish when you started jujitsu?
18. I started right after my birthday, and the reason why I started at 18 was because my mom wouldn't sign the waiver required to
Yeah.
do jiu-jitsu because I had gotten hurt in wrestling a little bit, and she's like, "Nah, we're not doing that."
And then when were you a brown belt world champion? At what age?
It was 2012, so let's see, 22.
So that's pretty quick, no? Is that pretty
Yeah,
quick?
yeah. My coaches try to hold me back a little bit more. But if you won the tournaments, you had to get promoted. If you won the worlds or you placed in the worlds, there's not a whole lot left for you, right? And looking back at it, I wouldn't mind if they held me back a little bit. I know everybody back then used to talk about like BJ Penn, and he was a black belt world champion and this and that. And so everyone was trying to get their belts really quick. And I fell into that, into that hype. But looking back at it, uh, you could have let me cook a little longer. It would have been
Yeah.
fine. I was very good at competing, so like I had a system for competing. But in terms of like all around jujitsu, I was relatively okay. My half guard at the time was awful. I'm trying to think. There were certain positions I just wasn't great at. I focused only on competition stuff. Like my defense wasn't that good. I just had a game and it worked.
Yeah, I feel like that's the opposite of me. That when I roll, it's like strictly for control and fighting, and I zero like zero. I don't even know the rules of the competitions, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Well, things have changed now, man. Obviously, like I said, jujitsu was my first love, but slowly I've fallen into in love with wrestling. So I pretty much wrestle. I want to say 5 days a week. No, yeah, either 4 or 5 days a week. I'm in practice in wrestling practice pretty much every day.
So then let's backtrack, and then we'll get up to the current stuff. When the brown belt world championships 22, did you end up graduating for college, or was college part of your whole process?
No, it was part of the process. I was still taking classes. I was actually ready to transfer, so I was pretty slow, right? Yeah, in 4 years you should be way past that. I was going to a junior college, and I should have transferred to a Cal State Fullerton at the time. But in 2012, my mom actually came to me and she told me, "Hey, like financially, we're not doing well." This was the first time she's ever said that to me, and I don't. At that time, I was a spoiled brat. If I worked for myself, and if I did anything, like it was all for me. It was all like I said, my whole goal was jujitsu. In 2012, she tells me this. This is after I won or I think I got silver actually at brown belt. No gi, I won the worlds, and then brown belt, I got silver. Anyways, after I competed, she came to me and told me like financially we're struggling, and I was like, okay. And she basically asked me for help. And my mom at this point in my life had never asked me for help, so I not only did I freak out, I didn't know what to do. And I wasn't a religious man by any standard at this time. I was actually the opposite of that. So I remember just going into my room and just freaking out. Like I've freaked out before, but never like that. To have your parent, to the person you trust with, with everything, to come to you and kind of be in fear and terrified and be like, hey, what are we gonna do? Sort of deal. It scared me. But in order to just make sure she's comfortable, I was like, hey, I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. I'll get something going. And I went into my room, and I didn't know what to do. So I literally just prayed. This was probably one of the first times I ever prayed. I was like, listen, if you're up there, if you're the real deal, I need something, right? And so MMA kind of doors open from MMA. It was weird. I got a call from my MMA coach, Rafael Cordero. I had done like 1 or 2 fights at that time, and I would do it just for fun. I'd go to him. I train with all his guys. I get my ass kicked. I show them some jujitsu and blah 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 blah. And then I do a fight, and then I come back and be like, all right, I'm back to jujitsu. He called me and he's like, hey, there's a fight for you. Do you want to fight in Brazil? And I was like, what? I was like, yeah, I kind of do actually, but I need money. And he tells me, listen, they're gonna pay you more than I've ever made ever fighting. Typically, I would have to pay back then to fight.
Mhm.
And the reason why they wanted me to fight or they were gonna pay me was because there was some chick in Brazil who was trying to be famous, like a musician. She had a band, and she had money. So she paid John Jones to come. She paid Fabricio Verdum to come, and she was looking for fighters from the States. And so Fabricio, my teammate, he tells me to go, and then another teammate of mine, and that's how we ended up there. She ended up paying me like 5K for that fight, which
Wow.
is crazy.
And this is before the UFC for Verdum?
No, he was in the UFC already.
Okay.
He was in the UFC. John Jones was in the UFC, and they called me and they're like, we're gonna give you 2K and then 5K if you win. And I freaked out. I was like, let's go. So 4 or 5 weeks later, I'm in Brazil. I win the fight in the first round. I think I threw a knee at the guy and it split his head open, and they stopped the fight. Come home. I give my mom the money, and then and I was basically gonna go back to jujitsu. I was like, we're good now, right? She's like, yeah, sort of. We have these things called bills, and they're every month. As a kid, man, I couldn't understand the concept of loans, and I was such a spoiled brat at the time. So she says to me, this is great, thank you. This is gonna get us for the next couple of months, but this is how life works. And I freaked out again. I didn't show like I'm freaking out, but I freaked out again. So I went back to my room and I did the exact same thing. Weird things started happening again. A friend of mine calls me and he asked me to teach him jujitsu. I've known this guy for years, and he asked me to start teaching him jujitsu. I was like, sure. I go to teach him a little bit. He's a lot older than me, right? He's like a father figure for me. I start teaching him jujitsu, and right about when I'm about to leave, he grabs me and he gives me money. And I was like, what is this? He's like, here, take this. I was like, no, I'm not taking money from you. He's like, no, you're gonna do it. And he's older than me, and in our culture, he's Middle Eastern as well. Like when he starts yelling, you listen. So he starts yelling and cursing me out. I was like, all right, all right, all right, relax. So I take the money again. I'm about to leave again. He grabs me and says, hey, when are we going to do this again? And I was at this point, I'm I'm both scared and excited, and I'm like, whenever you want. And then he says to me, okay, I want to do this 4 to 5 times a week. And
Wow.
so I started working with him 4 to 5 times a week, teaching him, and then still fighting MMA. And slowly my dream of jujitsu dies, but all of a sudden I have a new goal in MMA, and I wasn't as in love with it in the beginning, but then little by little, I just start falling in love with all the aspects of it, the wrestling aspect of it, the striking aspect of it, and I just fell in love with it. And 2 years later, I was in the UFC. It was like that.
Yeah. Is it just you and your mom, or you have siblings?
So I had a sister at the time, and one of the reasons why we were having a tough time, she was in nursing school, I guess, and one of the problems was her loans. So that was an issue we had, was her loans, and so we had those, and she couldn't work because nursing school is
Yeah.
it's and then once you do start working, your first couple of months is not that profitable. Anyways, so I was just in that spot. My sister, when she could, she started helping too, but yeah, fortunately, like, this is why, like, I didn't believe in God until I started praying, and then doors opened, and then I said, okay, I'm gonna have to figure this out. So that was kind of the road that led me to the Bible, and discovering who God was.
Yeah. And so, like, training with Cordero, how did that come about? So one of the things that, if I look back on my career and I think, like, okay, what could I have improved, or what would have been awesome, right? I think to myself, man, if I hodgepodged training, right? And then we had a base in Jersey, but it was always traveling here, traveling there,
Yeah.
traveling there. And it was just, it was like I was on the road so much. And specifically you, right? But I would watch you and your gyms and the lead ups to your fights, et cetera. I think, man, that's awesome. Like having that, right? Having a guy like that, Cordero, being there, being part of a gym. It, from my perspective, I thought that's awesome. Like that's so awesome. How did that happen, right? How'd you meet him? How'd you become part of that gym?
So it was really funny. Remember I mentioned Bruno Paulista, my original jiu-jitsu coach? He wanted to do MMA. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll help you. I was like helping him with MMA, and then one day he told me, oh, there's this really good MMA coach. We're gonna go see him, and it's gonna be in Babalu's gym. And Babalu at that time was the man. So we go in. This must have been 2009. So it was only a couple of years of me doing jiu-jitsu. We go in, and I see Jason Mayhem Miller, Fabricio Verdum, and Babalu. And then I have Bruno Paulista, my coach, who's also a big guy. He was a 205er. And I'm just looking at these big guys, and then I see Rafael Cordero, and he's about my size, a little bit bigger than me back then. I was pretty small back then. And they're like, oh, we're gonna spar. And I was like, man, I don't want to spar with these guys, but I was like, whatever, I'll just spar. I put my gloves on, I put my shin pads on, and at first round I go with my coach. And weird things start happening. I see Rafael Cordero going with Verdum first. And out of nowhere, I see Verdum go to the ground. And I was like, what the heck is going on there? Maybe he got hit in the nuts or something. So I don't pay attention to it. I keep going, and then we switch partners. I think I was going with Mayhem, and he's just goofing off. He realizes I wasn't very good, and so he's not trying to kill me. Which looking back on it was very nice of him.
Thankfully, yeah.
Yeah. So, but then I look over, and then I see. I think was it Babalu? I think it was Babalu. Babalu's on the ground now. And I don't understand what the heck's going on. I was like, can't be another nut shot, right? And I see like this is all with Cordero. And after that, I don't remember who I went with, but then he dropped my coach, Bruno. And then finally the lights kind of click in my head. And I realized this guy's dropping people. And so the fourth round is me and him. And I put my hands up. I just do what I know back then, which wasn't much. And he just starts working me. Like he was very nice in the fact that he didn't hit me in the head, but he dropped me maybe 3-4 times with push kicks, knees, and things of that nature. He didn't like when he kicked me. He had like flush on the head kicks. He would hold it and not finish me with the kicks, but he dropped me to the body a bunch of times, and I remember finishing that day and thinking to myself, what the hell just happened, right? So that was kind of how I met him. And I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, like if I'm going to try MMA, this is the guy. I started going to him. Originally, he looked at me and he's like, hey, you have a lot of potential. He like talking to me and I was like, yeah, that sounds great. But, I was more focused on jiu-jitsu. But then over time, our relationship went from just being coach student to almost like a father figure.
Yeah.
He became like a father figure, a son kind of deal. And that's how we are right now. A lot of times I'll go to him and we won't even like train together. He'll watch my training, or we'll just watch training, or we'll just talk about these other guys, and then that we like bounce off ideas off of each other, and then he'll watch my training, and about like 10 minutes of watching my training, he'll give me 3 things to work on. Mm-hmm. And those 3 things will be the key to me winning my fight. So we've spent so much time together. It's easy for him to see where my mistakes come from. And he fixes the foundation, and then the mistakes go away by themselves. It's been really cool working with him, because I've kind of tried to learn that style as much as I can. I don't try to my goal with guys isn't to teach them techniques as much as it is to teach them mindset. Like, hey, yeah. If you have the proper mindset, you're going to learn faster. You're going to improve everything faster. So that's kind of been the thing now at this age, especially. It took me, I don't know, 12, 15 years to learn it, but I got it down now.
Yeah. It's funny how, I don't know, like it happens in wrestling a lot. Guys after your career, when you start rolling around with guys in the room as a coach, you like learn this, that, the other thing. And like, son, man, I wish I'd have done that when I was wrestling. But
Exactly.
it only comes with age and experience. Who are some of your training partners now that are regularly a part of your training?
Man, I have some great guys. Obviously Giga Chikadze. Marvin Vittori. We used to be one of the guys, but he's not around right now. I have a guy by the name of Naaman Gracie. He's amazing to work with. I have Mike Cohn and I have Miguel. These are two good strikers I work with. Bro, I have some young guys that nobody knows about. There's so many guys I have. I have like Armenian guys come to me from LA who are great wrestlers and great judo guys. I have my wrestling coach Marcus Mullica. He was a 4-time All-American and 2-time national champion. I have another wrestling coach named Michael Perez. He was a Olympian from Cuba, and he like I have a guy named Chris. Bro, there's so many guys I work with. I'm so blessed to have all these guys around me, right? And they all bring different tools that I need. And so I know it's like you typically they say you want to be in a camp where there's a bunch of guys who like are I like I like that idea. I like, for example, going into a room and being nervous. And we have that Wednesdays. Wednesdays is our sparring. Wednesdays is like I get butterflies, like fight week butterflies. But the rest of the week is all like we're working this situation, we're working this situation, and we're working this and that. I have so many guys, man, which is great.
Yeah, I laugh when you said the young guys because I'll never forget. So I was in the UFC and it was literally when Khabib and Adlon, you remember Adlon Amagov? You remember that name at all?
Yes.
So it was when they came to the US prior to the UFC. And like I showed up on a random Friday and Adlon was there. And Adlon's one of the scariest guys I've ever trained with in my life, ever, with anything. And I'm going with this guy and I'm thinking, who is this guy? Nobody knows who he is. And I'm thinking, I'm in the UFC and he's like, I'm like kind of losing to this guy right now. So it was just and then rolling with Khabib, and then you see what they turn into and you're like, oh, all right, I feel a little bit better.
I think they had a big effect on the UFC, on the athletes of the UFC. Like guys decided, hey, we're gonna learn how to grapple because of them. And I think a lot of guys haven't really caught up yet. But I mean, I was one of those guys. I didn't really love wrestling back then. I did it like twice a week, but I wasn't in love with it. Over time, I fell in love with it, especially when I met Marcus. When I met Marcus Mullica, and he was so detailed in wrestling. It reminded me of my jujitsu coaches, and I love working with him. And he was like, "Hey, do it again. You suck. That was terrible. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again." Like I didn't mind him like breaking me down and making me do it again because that shows love. Like that shows he wants me to get better, right? I recognize that. So when I recognize that, I didn't mind because I've seen a lot of guys work with him and I've seen a lot of guys disappear because he's very particular, right? And that's what makes champion. So I stuck around and I worked with him a lot and I fell in love with wrestling because of him. And I think that's been one of the reasons why my wrestling has improved so much over the years.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to it, but you're talking about training and the different types of gyms. I remember one of the things that it's a philosophy really, and I'm curious your take on it. When you're leading up to a fight, is it really specialized and focused on you? Are you part of the bigger thing? Like how does that work for you?
In our gym is more of the bigger thing. Everyone has fights. Like year round, we have fights. So I'll they'll give me extra attention, obviously, right now because I have a fight coming up. But after my fight's done, I'm back in here and I'm back in the room and training and helping these other guys. So it's not so much where they just focus just on me. I have few coaches that only focus on me because I work with them one on one. But in the MMA room, we're all working the same stuff. We have so Rafael Cordero, for example, he'll make me work specifics as for me only, and then he'll have me work with the regular class, and I'll do what everybody else is doing. So they do put more emphasis on me right now, but the movement is still as a group.
Yeah. How old are you?
I'm 33.
33. And you mentioned your wife. Do you have any kids yet? Or do you have any
I
kids?
have two. I just had a baby
Congrats.
the 24th. So what is that? 11 days ago, something like that.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, thanks, brother.
How does that work into your bigger picture of what you do?
Bro, it was weird because I never wanted kids before, right? But then, when I became a Christian, kind of understood what life was all about. Then I was like, all right, maybe I do want kids. When I had my kids, I've always fought. Over the years now, I fight. When I fight, I recognize why I fight. I fight because I want to not squander the gifts God gave me. I believe God has given me certain gifts, and I don't want to waste them. And if I was to turn back on them, it's bro, you're turning your back on God. So it's a scary thought, right? That's the main reason I fight. But man, when I had my kids, it's like such a push. It's such a and I can't explain it. It's such a push. It's such a good push, and it just makes it easier to do the things that you don't want to do. Like I mentioned, I hate cardio. I hate strength and conditioning, but it makes it easier knowing that hey, that's another layer to it right there. So that's one thing I will say about my kids. And then the one thing I will say I'm different than other fighters. I don't leave my family when I have a fight. I have to be a good father first before I'm a good fighter. So like I won't leave my family. I took my family to Abu Dhabi with me.
Wow.
And yeah, it was rough because my daughter at the time was like 15 months or something. And so we're in Abu Dhabi, and the flight there was cool because she was like watching TV, she was sleeping and whatever. And Abu Dhabi, she loved it because bro, like fight week or 2 weeks before the fight, like you train once a day and you cut weight, things like that. So it's not like I'm training a lot. And so she would go to my practices. We would hang out during the day all day. And then fight week was pretty much the same. I would wake up. I can't I can't eat much, so I have my food ready. I go do my walking or whatever I need to do. Then I would go to breakfast with her. The rest of the hotel had nice food, so I have her eat whatever she wants. My wife is there hanging out too. And then like at nighttime we go train. I go train, she'd watch my training, and then I go and we put her to sleep, and that would be the day. The only day I wasn't really like attached to them was the day of the fight. Because of the day of the fight is my energy is weird. I think it was the only day I didn't pick her up. Every other day she was in my arms the whole time and we were hanging out, which which made the fight week go a
Yeah.
lot like easier too, right? I don't like the idea of I gotta leave my family for like some guys will leave for camp, and I understand it's different, right? Maybe their kids have school or whatever, but I don't like the idea of separating because right now our culture is weird. The kids are kids are in such a tough spot. I think kids are more vulnerable now than ever before with social media, with everything, with the way we treat kids, and the victim mentality we have right now. So with all that said, I just I don't want to be apart from my children. I want to make sure I'm always their leader. I'm always the one teaching them, and that's how we're gonna make it through this.
Yeah, man. I agree with that. And it's why I do what I do. I speak now for a living, but I speak in schools most of the time. And
I
it's
saw that.
for
I
that
saw that.
exact
Super
reason.
cool.
Yeah. Um family training. What was my next segue that I wanted to your mindset. So you're like I said, I've always respected you and thought he's a nice person, like carries himself well, speaks well, doesn't get caught up in the I don't know, the talking smack aspect of fighting. What is your mentality heading into a fight? Do you doubt yourself? Are you total confidence? Do you have a mix? Like what's going on in your brain back in the like locker room prior to the walkout ring? They're announcing your name. What is your mindset?
So that far, I mean, at that point, I just want to be over with it. I'm like, I'm so bored of this. I just want to fight, right? But I will say this: for fighting, there has always been this brokenness. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I remember competing in jiu-jitsu, and I remember going against guys that I wasn't better than that. They were technically better than me. But I remember if I just kept digging and digging and digging, and all of a sudden they're not as fast as before. They're not as technical as before. And you can start to see them break. And I took genuine pleasure in that. Like it was my favorite part of jujitsu. It was breaking guys in tournaments. And sometimes I wouldn't even submit them, but I knew I
Mhm.
pretty much, this was a submission in my mind. Right. So there was that aspect of it. And then when I was really young, I remember getting beat up, and I went to my father to be comforted, and he just kind of was like, why'd you lose, kind of deal, right? And I must have been like 3 or 4 years old, and that was the mindset kind of he had. He was a little bit, he was a little strange, terrible advice from a father. Anyways, he tells me, why'd you lose? You should have picked up a stick or a rock. You should have won, you know. And being a kid back then, I thought my dad was the best. So I thought he was a genius. So I was like, oh, yeah, I should have done that. You're right. So that stuck with me my whole life. It took a long time before I could kind of change that. But right now, I will say this. Those 15 minutes are my favorite 15 minutes because I get to go back to being that stupid guy who likes breaking people and you know, having that broken part of me be useful. I get like that's not a good mindset to have in life. But in fighting, in what I do, I can use that mindset. And so I think of it like this: even the worst part of me, God uses, you know. And so in those 15 minutes, honestly, the fight part is just fun. I hate the locker room. I hate the media stuff. I hate the fake cookie cutter like drama they try to make. So those are the things I don't like. But man, I love fighting. I don't know what it is, but just they say go and I'm at home. They say go, we touch gloves and I'm at home. You know, I typically I either win or I go out on my shield. I'm not and I'm trying to get better at being like game planned and more methodical. But I I genuinely just enjoy fighting.
So
That's what I love.
it's funny, man. I love asking that question because it was a love hate for me. I was scared out of my mind, but I enjoyed being scared out of my mind. And then I just liked putting myself in the situation where I couldn't back out. I had to fight, and he'd say fight, and then I have to fight. So I love hearing what different people think, because I think, man, that would be awesome if I loved fighting like I love watching Netflix, right? That'd be like the
Yeah.
best thing in the world.
You know what you mentioned? Yours sounds like roller coaster, right? Like before a roller
Yeah.
coaster, you want to get on. You're
Yeah.
scared of it, but you know
Yeah.
once you do it, it's going to be awesome. I don't know if I have that same feeling for fighting. I genuinely just want to be in the room and I want to establish dominance. That's more my
Yeah.
thing, you know. I I I hate losing, obviously, but I really, you know, I will say this: when the fight starts getting closer, and I have to focus more on like being technically proper and winning the rounds the way I should, it becomes less fun. I will say that I it becomes less fun when I don't have a fight and I'm in the room and I could just go nuts and do whatever I want. That is my favorite training. So that's
Yeah.
another reason why I think I get better so much because I the first thing I want to do when I'm done training is just come back and train for fun.
Yeah. What's your weight? What do you not like out of shape, Beneil, but what do you generally weigh?
I would say around 185. One thing that has changed, my, you know, I went to my doctor and I told him, you know, we were after I broke my leg. I talked to him and he was like, "You have to be smarter. You don't really take supplements." And I told him, you know, he asked me what I take for supplements. I was like, I drink milk twice a day, and he thought I was joking. I was like, no, I'm serious. And one thing that's changed, I would say, is taking like nutrition seriously. So I started taking supplements, and two things that really made me bigger were creatine and electrolytes. I take electrolytes 2 times a day, and then I take creatine once a day, and that's had a really big effect on me. If I take those things out of my diet right now, I probably go down anywhere between 5 to 7 pounds. So
Yeah.
I typically walk around 185, but I'm more 178 when I'm not on that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Um, I'll start to kind of wind it down. What do you have coming up next? What fight, when, where?
I got Charles Oliveira in New Jersey, May 6th, which is my birthday. And supposedly it's a number one contender fight. You know, the reason why I say supposedly because I thought the last one was a number one contender fight. I have a great relationship with the UFC, but I also understand that I'm not I'm not a selling point for them. So they're not really excited for me to be in a title picture, you know, especially like a guy like me wins the title. You know, I'm not really big into the drama. It's kind of hard for them to sell. They don't really have they don't have a product or a method of selling this product. So
Mhm.
it's hard for them. I get it.
Post fighting, right? So you're 32. You've been in the UFC, I don't know, 9 years, I think. Do you think about the future?
Yeah. So right now we're actually in my gym. I own a MMA gym. It's also called King's MMA. That's one thing, but I don't know if this is gonna be what I do. To be honest with you, what I would like to do is a lot of missionary work. Currently, I have something in Haiti, and then I travel to Asia about once or twice a year. But I used to travel to Haiti more, but things are really bad right now, and my team there has told me not to come. Basically, we have a church there, we have a children's home there, and then we have a school there. These are things we support from here, and so those are things I want to do when I'm retired. I want to focus more on these things. I have lots of places I want to go, but Haiti's definitely on my heart, and then also Asia.
All right, man. I'll wrap it up here, but I appreciate. I think you're a very cool dude. I've respected you outside the ring and inside the ring. You're. I love watching you fight. Just like forward, 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 forward. I love it. I appreciate and respect you, and I appreciate being here, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was getting that message from you was so cool. Just to be able to do this was amazing. And then I started looking at your social media and seeing you talk to kids, and bro, it really just brought joy to me. So I was really excited to do this. And again, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Likewise, brother. Thanks.
Take care.